Controversy over slavery's possible expansion into the West drove the North and South further and further apart during the 1850s. One episode in this controversy, the fight between free soil and pro-slavery settlers in the Western Territory of Kansas, can help us to understand what was happening and why. Recall that with the end of the Mexican-American War in 1848, a vast expanse of territory, sprawling from Texas to the Pacific coast, was taken from Mexico by the United States in the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo. Americans, having doubled the size of the United States, were now forced to address the divisive question of slavery. Would the South's peculiar institution, as it was called, be allowed to spread into the Western territories taken from Mexico, or would it remain confined to those states where it had already been established? Notice that I did not ask, or would slavery be abolished? The abolition of slavery was not part of the mainstream debate. An organized abolitionist movement did exist, of course, but it had, at most, a marginal impact. Most Americans, South and North, believed abolitionists to be impractical, unpatriotic fanatics. Most Northerners who opposed the spread of slavery westward did so because they wanted to reserve the West for free white farmers, not because they cared about black slaves. In other words, most Northerners opposed to the expansion of slavery were free soilers, not abolitionists. One of the most popular proposals for trying to decide whether or not slavery would be allowed to spread into the West was called popular sovereignty. Popular, the people; sovereign, the power to rule or choose. In other words, let the settlers who actually live in the Western territories vote on whether or not they want slavery. On its face, this sounds like a fair proposal, unless you were enslaved, of course. Majority rules. Democracy. The people have the power. Don't let the bureaucrats back in Washington, D.C. decide this question. No, popular sovereignty said, let the settlers in the West choose for themselves. If Utah settlers vote for slavery, so be it. If New Mexico chooses free soil for itself, so be it. That's democracy. However, what might sound good on a bumper sticker, what might sound good in theory, doesn't always work out so well in practice. In fact, the first time the nation actually attempted to implement the doctrine of popular sovereignty in a territory called Kansas, beginning in 1854, it was a disaster. The most fervent partisans from both sides, North and South, were drawn to Kansas in an effort to influence its new government, for or against the legalization of slavery in Kansas. The debates between Northerners and Southerners in Kansas soon escalated, and by 1855, Americans were killing each other over the question of slavery in the West. It was a grim foretaste of the unimaginably bloody Civil War that would nearly destroy the nation just a half-decade later.